Talk Art. I'm Sally Rayn, and I will be your host as we delve into the world of the artist and the art that's all around us. Talk Art is sponsored by the Silicon Valley Open Studios. During the first 3 weekends in May, hundreds of local artists open their studios to the public. For more information, go to the website svos.org. Our guest for this show is Matthew Bailey Seigel, and he paints modern scrolls. He uses acrylic paint and synthetic rice paper to create his very colorful 5-foot by 2-foot scrolls. So welcome, Matthew.
Welcome, Sally.
Well, thank you for being here.
Oh, this is great.
Yeah, so you have such beautiful, vibrant art. Tell us a little bit about your background and where this art might have come from.
I was in Japan from 0 to 2 years old. My parents had scrolls all around the house. There were scrolls in Japan. And when they moved back to the United States, they brought lots of scrolls with them. And with scrolls, you change them often, unlike regular paintings, with the seasons and special occasions. So still, I was a young child, and I started copying scrolls onto reams of just computer paper.
Oh, so you created your own scrolls as a kid?
Yeah, I
nice.
rolled out big rolls of paper and just cheap paper and drew on them with inks and crayons and things, mostly black and white. These did not come from that directly. There's no direct initial lineage. I started doing these much later out of some painting I did as an adult. But when I started putting together, I realized that. I remembered, wait, I did this years ago.
I remember doing this as a child.
Yeah,
cool.
So that was interesting.
Some of your early influences were Japanese then.
Definitely. That definitely comes through in some of the sort of rules that I follow for making scrolls.
Oh, nice. So do you have any education in art? How did you become a painter?
I studied at the Rhode Island School of Design,
nice.
But that was in industrial design, nothing to do with painting. So again, it wasn't until years later doing some tech work in Silicon Valley and kind of needed a break from that on the side, I started painting, which I love precisely because there's no undo button with painting versus most computer
undo
work.
Button. I like that.
So I'm self-taught in the painting, not from art school. Although certainly in art school, they've got all that sort of in there somewhat anyway.
Yeah, so you learn design and
right.
and ways to envision a piece as you progress. Good.
And my mother also teaches and taught watercolor out of our house my whole life. So whatever that's getting in there too somehow.
Excellent. So you brought some images of paintings that you've done starting from very early images.
Yes.
So why don't we take a look at those now and see some of your earlier works and then as you progress, some of your influences.
Thank you. This first piece was done for Art Arc Gallery in San Jose. It was the first scroll that I did, just a long sheet of 8-foot by 3-foot paper. And the theme of the show was on peace and defer. So I wrote here that if creative visualization is all about seeing things happen and focusing on it and feeling it, then if our movies have wonderful, strong, powerful explosions in them that we can feel, then maybe that's why there's explosions going on around us in real life. Just asking. That sort of summarizes up what I said. And I carefully wrote that out and carefully laid it out, but when I started painting it, things dripped, you'd misspell, and I would get in the moment, and I just stopped worrying about trying to follow the writing, and I just would write and cross things out and edit on the fly.
That became part of the painting.
That became part of the painting, and even those principles I started to follow, where now I make up words on the fly when I write, I edit on I don't worry about things being perfect or controlled.
Excellent. So the next one is beautiful. Look at those colors.
Yeah, so this, to sort of give a sense of the process of the paintings, I do lots and lots and lots of sketches, either on small sheets of paper. These are actually letterpress wedding invitation size paper, 100% cotton rag. They're 4 by 6 inch. And I just draw and draw, and on these, the idea is just to make little finished works. And you can, I have some more of those. Here's another one of those small sketches. I also do plenty of sketches from outside, real life. I go out in nature and I draw from the woods and plants, and then I do lots and lots of sort of just thumbnails and small works. So those sketches worked up. Here's the actual scrolls for a show, and this was at Collide Gallery in San Jose, where I was a member at the time, and I had a solo show there. And these are just some of the paintings from there, and the overall theme of this one was nature, but I was trying to do nature not quite realistically, like semi-abstract, and the way I describe it, it's the feeling of walking in the woods. Let's say it's snowing at night, that evokes a feeling, but not to actually draw it like that. In this case, it was sort of, here's bamboo bird, and again, there's several
I like the way you
here.
have a layered effect where there are layers of paint, different colors on top of each other. It's very interesting.
Yeah, I build them up that way. I'll lay down, I may be looking at the sketch, or sometimes I do enough sketches, I kind of have a way of working it, and I'll just go in there and put down a layer, see how I react to it, put down another layer, react to it. And I was trying to create a sort of feeling of depth, the way you would in the woods or walking through a field of flowers.
Very nice.
Okay, now this one is more direct. My father lives up in Cushing, Maine, and I'm walking on a beach there, and these are the rocks. And as soon as I saw the rocks, I'm like, okay, I've got to paint this. I've got to do something about this. It's just that endless feeling of abstract rocks of all different shapes. So sitting on his porch, I just started painting right there on some scrolls that I brought with me. Here's a close-up of one of those, and we have another one here. Here's the other painting.
So that's the completed painting of the rocks on the beach. Yeah, I really like the way that you've captured the idea that nature and patterns in nature can be very abstract. Very nice.
Yeah, it's kind of fun because there's a guy down the street who paints highly photorealistic rocks up near my father, but I'm not, I respect those kind of artists, but I've always been sort of going the other way, trying to capture more of a feeling of something.
Excellent. So you brought some sketchbooks for us to take a look at. So
sure. Specifically the ones in Maine, you know, I just start kind of abstracting them out.
So did you do that before you started painting the scroll?
Definitely.
Yes.
Here's another one. Here's the big one. And the funny thing is, some of these I started sketching from life. I was tied his rowboat up in the middle of the harbor and just sat there drifting around painting things.
Out there.
And then I also work out, you know, how they, how the paintings, the tones, and how they kind of work technically, but I'll work how they work emotionally and how I'm going to layer them out, so that kind of thing.
Great.
Other times it's much more about...
So that looks like a much more formal series.
This is much closer to one of the paintings themselves. When I start getting closer to doing some... So the rocks I just kind of went into because I knew what I wanted to do. But here I'll start doing... These are all laid out the correct proportions. And I just start working through them.
Getting details. So you work with the color and then adding details and the different layers?
Yes, I got...
all kinds of ideas.
And it's directly I'm trying to come up with ideas, but I'm also, you know, exploring in here. Yeah, that's funny. And when I work through them, I may find one, I say, wow, that one works, and then I'll try to go large. Or maybe I'll be doing a whole bunch and I have a feeling that sort of works, and I'll just do it large without looking at it or something.
So you plan series and themes, or do you start working on an idea and then see how far it will take you? Tell me a little bit about
the next step, or the...
Yeah, the tools that you use and the process you go from the sketch to a completed series.
Okay. Well, I've got these, either the little tiny drawings on paper, and I have the sketched ones. Then I'll go large and just start using the beginning, trying to copy one exactly. Sometimes I try to work loose because the best ones are actually where it's slightly on the edge of, I call it sort of danger, in that it isn't working and it feels funny. So then I try to fix it. Sometimes it's an exact copy, but the best ones are not an exact copy. They're done loose the way they are in a sketchbook. So I may do several that just kind of, don't work out. But then I keep going and keep repeating, and by the time you get to 10, 20 of them, you can pull perhaps half of them or 2/3 out of there that are nice and that work. And the other ones you can usually manage to fix, because I'm not painting your portrait, so it doesn't have to be perfect. And even the ones that aren't working, I may go in and just sort of mess them up or do something to throw me off kilter.
So you brought an example of a series that you started that you have here hanging in the studio. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that progression?
I'll start from the far left. Again, I was going back to some of the earlier themes of plants and just being outside, walking around in a garden. And then I'll look at that, and it's almost sort of an evolution for me, where I look at that and I say, well, what I liked about that was, how come in the sketchbooks the lines are so much bolder? It's like, oh, of course, the sketchbooks are this big.
Smaller.
So if I'm working with a marker in there, I'm still not scaling it up enough. So I think it's a wonderful painting on the left. But in the middle, I said, how can I really, really scale up that brush? So the middle one is actually a very close copy of a tiny little sketch. I'm not even trying to improvise as I do it. I used a much, much thicker line, and I think this was definitely working with what I was trying to do, where it had the feeling of the little sketch. Where if you can imagine that scaled down, that's a ballpoint pen or a marker.
Right.
Then the third one, I said, well, I like there's a background on the first one, but I don't know if I like the blank white. Maybe, maybe not. So I filled the background in on the one on the right. So in a way, these have a different look on all of them, but that's how they evolve. So when I start getting up to 10 or 20 of these, some more of a theme will probably emerge.
And it looks like you painted a very colorful background and then covered that over somewhat, sort of made it foggy with the gray.
This is exactly how I saw a label on a tea bottle, and I thought, oh, maybe that would be interesting for a solid background. I'll paint them all in orange. So I painted the background all in orange. And to me, it didn't work. I didn't like the way it looked. So I started painting over it. And when I started painting over it, there's a point where it's not finished painting over it. I could continue and completely obliterate the orange, but I liked the way things were peeking through. So once I saw that, again by an accident, then I deliberately continued and went around the edges, leaving a little bit of a glow and leaving some glow at the bottom on purpose. So now what would happen from this is another painting I would do that on purpose from the beginning. I say, color underneath with a color on top, and leave some edges glowing. So that's how things kind of keep rolling.
I really like the way the colors are. It's a small part of that painting, nothing like the first one where the colors are everything.
Right.
But the colors are much more significant because they accent what you're trying to do very well. So thank you. And then you have a demonstration. You've started another one of this series.
Right.
And so why don't you go ahead and show us some of your painting style?
Sure. Usually I would have started with the dark lines that you see in the middle one over there, but I wanted to get something kind of going here. So in this, I took my time and I carefully sort of placed them in a way that felt right to me and varied the tone a little bit. But now I'm going to lay down a indigo color, and I'm going to go quite quickly. Probably don't usually go this quickly, but I'm going to work with it and see what happens. Now, I don't like using paint straight out of the tube, so this indigo is actually a blue mixed with a red that pushes it way towards a kind of a black. Sometimes I would have a little sketch next to me. Sometimes I'm doing what I'm doing now, where I put it down, and this is, then I try to balance it in what works. And you can see this. You can see how it just completely is already starting to change everything to have some marks put down. What's great about the material, which is sort of a synthetic, it's not paper, it's not plastic either, is I can get it very wet. So I'll do that, And you'll see drips, but you'll also see a lighter sort of tone to the painting. I'll deliberately drip things on purpose sometimes. And then I may come back later and decide I don't like this and paint over it. Those are the kinds of things that happen. There is a tradition in scroll painting where they often will dip in really thick brush and ink and see how sort of fast they can do and get a perfect stroke. I'm not really doing that here. I'm going back into it, but definitely aware of that. Now, one nice thing about acrylic paint is it dries very quickly. So I would probably let it dry a little bit now, but I'm going to put some other colors in here. They're going to just blur and blend together, but that also can be interesting. Another thing I'll do is I'll paint with the back of something or with a point, and you can see it comes through. And this paint also has a very wonderful sort of almost finger paint quality to it, because if I So again, I had the overall sort of painting in mind, but I'm doing a lot of improvising as I go. The other really great thing about acrylics that people don't understand versus getting a regular sort of print is that you can get iridescence and metallics. This paint in here happens to actually be ground up stainless steel, which when you look at the painting up close, it has a whole other sort of texture. It's just... And that's one of the things I love about working with acrylic, is what else is available. I also sometimes use a paint stick. This was fluorescent, and it's actually designed for construction crews to draw on metal or wood. And it comes in about 6 colors. But it lets you sort of draw right into it. It's kind of like a crayon or a grease pencil. And of course, there's the same sort of idea, but in fluorescent paint. Now, again, I mentioned I might have let this dry, which it will do pretty quickly. But obviously, being wet is useful as well, because you get just wonderful sort of blends going on. Did you have any questions about any of the process here? Or
well, I'm interested. I'm watching you create the different layers. I can see how that works with the types of paints that you do. I'm interested in the actual material that you're painting onto, the synthetic rice paper.
It's sort of like the kind of stuff you see on the housing wraps. It's like a Tyvek or a FedEx envelope or a marathon running bib or that kind of thing. It's in that category, and it's if you hold it up to the light, it looks like a paper. There will be a little bit of acrylic going through it, the water, but if this had been in paper, it would get very wrinkled, soaking with this much water. And it's not going to get wrinkled in that way. It dries up really nice.
That's great. Well, thank you so much for that demonstration. So you have some other series, and you brought some images with you that you can share about a particular series that you had in a show.
Yes.
So why don't we take a look at those now, and you can tell us a little bit about the backgrounds of those.
Sure. These were from a show at Cafe Trieste in San Jose. This is not Cafe Trieste. It was also shown again later as part of the community sites for the Pacific Art League. And the paintings were in a coffee shop. So I was just doing my own thing that I wanted to do and the theme I was working on. But then I found a good friend of mine was getting married in the coffee shop up on the second floor. And she's of Japanese descent. So at some point I decided to throw some Japanese characters into her, to work them into the paintings. They seemed to fit with some of the ideas I was doing. So I wasn't doing it as a commission or sort of forcing it to do it that way. It just felt like something that the energy of the paintings changed. So I had two characters in here for love. It was sort of hard for me to understand the translation, but one of them she said was more like marriage and one was more like dating.
So these are actual writing characters?
Yes,
Kanji?
the Japanese, yes.
Very nice. And then this...
So this is the four of them hanging, and here's them by themselves.
Now these seem much more linear than the rounded shapes that you've been working on.
Yeah, this one was called Pickle Clouds.
I can see why.
Let's see the next one. This is another one of the ones from the show. And what was interesting is where I paint them in my studio, it's a kind of small space. So it's actually things change completely when you see them somewhere else. For example, here, the one earlier was in San Mateo in a community foundation, and then in Cafe Trieste, they look different with other lighting.
Right.
And people all said they felt like stained glass windows, seeing all, and I can't necessarily have 5 of them in a row where I live.
Right.
But here I could put 5 or 6, and I have natural lighting. So that's exciting that art comes to life in different ways every place you put them. So that was.
And the next one?
Sure. So these again are all from that series in Cafe Trieste.
I can see the stained glass. It definitely has that quality because you use such vibrant colors, and they seem to be more separated than what you were painting today. A little bit.
Yes, and
Not
I
quite as blended.
definitely did not say, okay, I'm going to do stained glass or
No,
something. But you see these things when they're done, and then what happens there, then you say, oh, well, the next series, maybe I'll try to work them as an entire triptych, or maybe I'll have them work together as another sort of body of work, is the expression they use. This one actually does say love in Western characters, vertically down the middle. Not overtly, but it's there.
I see it. Yep. Very nice.
Let's see, do we have more, or is that it? And they were nature in the beginning, but these much more also have lines and feelings that are sort of the energy and kind of passion and excitement that was coming through. Thank you.
Great. Yeah, what I notice in your paintings, the ones that are behind us and some of the ones that you've shown, that you do work in actual words.
Yes.
Here and there. Tell us a little bit about why you incorporate writing in your paintings, because they're so abstract.
So if you remember the art piece in Defer one, where that was deliberately written for a reason.
Right.
And I was also doing series of sort of small cards and little paintings where I put words or I made up stories and letters. So that always kind of was in what I was playing with. But then when I started thinking more about traditional Asian scrolls, there's several things in them. there's usually plants, nature, landscape, animals, bugs, and birds, and there are certainly words written on them,
Right.
poems, stories. So I thought, okay, it didn't justify it, but it made me feel more comfortable going ahead and doing things like that. Even paintings that are largely unpainted. At first I thought,
Right.
wait, paintings have to be covered. And I went back and looked at scrolls, and I said, no, scrolls are often completely uncovered except for a
Right.
few marks. So I liked, again, it wasn't that I was saying, I'm going to do it as an Asian scroll. I was just sort of doing it, but then that helped me kind of think about it more consciously. And maybe it went back to when I was 2, maybe not, I don't know. Or maybe it's just what I like doing, but
Right.
that's why they're in there.
So is it meant to be sort of poetic, or are the words more part of the image? How do you look at it?
The Japanese ones, I liked the feelings of the characters, but I wanted the characters not to just be made up something.
Right.
So they were love, and that played in somewhat to her wedding. It also played into the look that I wanted. The one on your right over here, it just felt like some of these paintings were all about sort of being aware of where you are, so it says aware of one moment. Many of my paintings I just write aware on them. The
Very
one
nice.
directly behind you, the colorful one on the far left, that says aware right down the middle. And then these two, I have not written any. Well, no, it says aware up there.
Yep, I see
Small.
it. Very
And I
nice.
don't know. And then
You
right there,
scratched
yeah,
it up.
okay. So I
you
even
did.
forgot.
Aware. Very nice.
So
Well,
that's
Matthew,
where that comes from.
thank you so much for being on Talk Art. This has been a really interesting and educational
Sure.
way of looking at art. So thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
This has been enjoyable.